Events can be used to notify the runtime of specific events from our Rive animation, like a specific frame in a timeline or a click on an element. Let's go ahead and learn about the same. To demonstrate the use of events, I've created a menu example which has the interaction setup. You can see we have the hover interaction and the click interaction to change the active item. Now how the state machine is set up is I have the different booleans for the different hover states and a number input to keep track of the active item. Now all of this works together with the listeners for the hover in and hover out, and also the pointer down event to change the active icon number input in regard with each item. Now inside our state machine, we can change the active item by clicking on the same. But what if we want to notify the runtime of the same? That is the current change in the active item. To do that, we can use events. Let's go ahead and set up an event for the same. To create an event, you can go to the toolbar and select the event tool and click anywhere on the stage to create an event. You can see the same in the hierarchy. And because the event is not a visual element, you can place it anywhere. Let's keep it beside our layout item because this will be an event for the layout item tab when this is active. So let's create an event for the same. In the inspector, you can see we can set a name for the event to identify this in the runtime. And in this case, we can name it layout tab like this. Now you can change the name either from the inspector or the layer as well, that is in the hierarchy. If I change it to layout tab event, you can see it is changed here as well. So both of them are synced. Let's set it back to layout tab. Next, you have the option to set a type for this event. Now generally it would be general, but if this is a link or a button element, you can directly set it as open URL, which goes ahead and gives you a field to enter the URL, which will be opened whenever you fire this event. So that's how you can enter a URL to be opened from your Rive animation. But in this case, we want a general event. So let's set it back to general. Now that the event is set up, let's go ahead and fire the same, which is essentially notifying the runtime of this event. Now there are several ways to fire an event, and one of them is to fire an event from a timeline animation. And here you can see we have the layout active timeline, which is being transitioned in the state machine. So you can go ahead and report this event here. So open your timeline, select your event, and click on the report event button. It goes ahead and inserts a keyframe in the timeline, which in turn fires our event. Now watch what happens when I play this timeline. You can see the event is fired, and the same is denoted by this small animation on the event object. Now you can go ahead and fire an event multiple times in a timeline, and to demonstrate that, I can go ahead and create a new timeline, select the event, report it at the start, and then let's say 30 frames ahead, I can go ahead and report it again. Now if I go ahead and play the timeline, you can see the event is fired twice. So that's how you can report an event from a timeline. Another way to trigger an event is from the state machine itself. That is, in these transitions, we can go ahead and report an event. Now let's say when we go to the layout active state, that is this transition, we can go ahead and fire this event at that time. You can see we have the events panel, click on the plus icon and choose your event. Now if I go ahead and start the state machine and then set the layout as active icon, you can see the event is fired. Now there is another thing to note here, that is you have the option to fire this event at the start or the end of this transition. That is, if this transition has a duration, you can choose to fire this event at the start of the duration or after the duration completes. Now here, because the duration is very small, let's go ahead and increase that to, let's say, 1 second. so that we can notice the difference. Now that the event is set at start, it will be fired at the very start of the animation or the transition. So if I go ahead and select the layer icon, you can see the event is fired at the start. Now if I go ahead and set it to end, and now if I go ahead and restart the state machine, select the layer icon, you can see the transition plays and then the event is fired. That's a neat feature to have to be able to control when the event is fired in the transition. Alternatively, you also have the option to fire the event in the timelines as well. That is, you can select the timelines itself and report the events from there. Last but not the least, you can also report events from the listeners. That is, in the listeners, we can go ahead and report the events as an action. So let's say when the layout tap happens, we set the active icon as the layout item, and here we can go ahead and report the event as well. To do that, you can click on the plus icon to add an action, and the action will be firing an event. Now go ahead and choose your event, and now whenever this listener occurs or the pointer down event happens, we will fire the event. So let's start the state machine, click on the layout item, and you can see the event is fired. Similarly, we can go ahead and set up events for the other items as well. So that's how we can use events in Rive. I have a very basic HTML project setup where we'll go ahead and load in our Rive animation. So let's go ahead and instantiate the Rive animation. We'll provide it the source, that is the Rive file I exported earlier, and then the canvas element inside of our document. I'll set autoplay to true, and the state machine will be our state machine. Let's provide the artboard as well. And now you can see we have our animation on the web page. Let's go ahead and resize it on load as well, so that it is nice and crisp. You can see we have our animation with the state machine and the interactions. That is, you can see we go ahead and change the active item, the hover states, and all. Now let's go ahead and listen to the event states, that is whenever the events are triggered. To do that, we can use our menu object. So we can go ahead and use the on method to listen for Rive events. So Rive event type will be a Rive event. And then I can go ahead and call a function. Let's call it Rive event. So it will be a function and will receive the Rive event object. Now I can go ahead and just console log the Rive event. Now if I go ahead and click on any element, you can see we get the Rive event printed on the console. Now on this Rive event, you can access the type of this Rive event, that is whether or not this is a general Rive event or a URL event, and then you can access the data from the data property. So first of all, we have the name of the Rive event. I can go ahead and get the name of each Rive event, say the layout, the style, or the effects like these. So that's how you can use Rive events in the runtime as well.